Okay, let's power on the printer. Look all the way around the back and find the power switch. As the machine boots up, you'll see the Ultimaker logo, you'll see the ring light around the user interface control, and you'll see the house lights come on inside the work envelope. Next, go ahead and find the printer filament dryer and turn it on by pushing this little button on the left. Hit either button and you'll see that the dryer is set to achieve a temperature of 45 degrees Celsius. And if you wait for a minute, it'll flip back to the current temperature, room temperature, and you can watch it start heating up slowly to that value of 45 degrees. Next, find the container marked PLA for Ultimaker Training. PLA stands for polylactic acid. It's one of the friendlier thermoplastics that we've got. And it loves to absorb moisture in the air, so it's here in an airtight container to prevent that from happening. So take off the lid of the airtight container, and you'll find a bunch of desiccant, which is trying to keep the inside of that airtight container nice and dry. Make sure that the material inside this container really is PLA. And for the Ultimaker, make sure that it is 2.85 millimeters in diameter. Take it out of the container, put the desiccant back in the container, put the lid back on the container, and seal that lid. Desiccant only lasts so long, and so you don't want it just sitting out in the room, consuming its lifespan, achieving nothing. Now put the spool of filament into the dryer, but which way? This way or this way? Well, close the lid, and on top of it you'll see a hole. You want your filament to come off the spool well in line with this hole. Take the end of your filament and spool it through the hole and close the lid, and confirm that you can pull filament up through the hole and have the spool spin freely without snagging and binding and toppling the dryer. At this point, you're ready to say hello to the filament feeder. The filament feeder has a hole in the bottom into which you're going to insert the filament. It's got a viewing window on the front face through which you're going to see your filament ride along the pulley and the toothed wheel. And it's got a Bowden tube at the top in which you're going to see the tip of the filament finally emerge. So are you ready to load it and go? Well, let's first investigate the health of the filament. Look at this filament. Somebody left it out, and now it's absorbed moisture from the air, and it is brittle. I can snap it right off with my fingers, or one bend back and forth, and it crumbles away. This is unhealthy. Now look at the filament after drying and carefully being stored inside of an airtight container with desiccant. This filament is healthy, it's flexible, and it doesn't immediately shatter, break, or crumble away. Now that you've confirmed the health of your filament, consider its shape. It's coming off the spool, and it's absorbed that wrap around the spool, so it's all curvy. So part of what you're doing here too is you are bending the filament back into a straight line configuration as best you can to ease its journey up through the feeder. If you don't do this, it is a real pain trying to get that filament through the pulley, past the toothed wheel, and up into the Bowden tube. Okay, let's do it. Pull your filament gently up from the dryer, confirming that it still spins. Bring it up to the feeder, and then get your hand, the strongest one you've got, positioned on the feeder. Do you see this switch on the side? I like to use my thumb because that switch is pretty darn hard to pull. You need to pull that switch upward, thus releasing the gripping action of that toothed wheel. You gotta pull it up, and then you have to manually feed the filament up into the hole, past the pulley, past the toothed wheel, up into the Bowden tube until you see just the tip of it starting to appear. And look at me, a seasoned expert, and I cannot get it in there. I've got to bend the filament even more into that straight line configuration and try and try and try again before there it slips into the Bowden tube. And you're just trying to get the very first little bit into the Bowden tube. You're not trying to walk this up manually all the way up the tube. That's going to cause a crash. You're trying to leave the filament just barely visible. So you can see here I'm even retracting it just a little bit before moving on with the next step in the procedure.